Hello friends, it's Lisa, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read this fall. This is going to be a mixture of my September and October wrap-up. I believe I read 4 things in September and 7 in October, I think, so 11 books in total, and we're just going to chat about my thoughts on them. Some of them have shown up in various vlogs, so we'll just kind of go through those ones quickly, but yeah, let's just jump into the wrap-up. So because this is a wrap-up of the last couple of months, some of these books I read back in September 2 months ago. So it's really going to be putting my brain to the test, and I apologize if any of my thoughts are not super detailed because it has been a minute since I've read some of these books. But the first book that I finished back in September was Only When It's Us by Chloe Liese. This is the first book in a series of like companion romance novels, and this author is pretty popular. I've been wanting to start this series for a while. Not that I need to start any more series, but I did it because I really just want to read this series. So this book, you're following Willa and Ryder, who sit next to each other in class. They are both in the same course in college, and they get sat next to each other, end up being partnered up for this project, but they don't have the best like first interactions with one another, so they kind of very much decide to not like each other right from the start. They both make some assumptions about one another that kind of sets them in their ways of not liking each other and trying to ignore each other, but once they get partnered up for this project, they kind of have to put that aside to make this work and to get good grades in their course, so they reluctantly start seeing and hanging out with each other more and more, and they also start to learn a lot more about each other. They both have a lot of things going on in their personal lives and things that they're struggling with. We have Ryder, who is hard of hearing, and that is something that developed later in life. It's still something that is kind of more recent and something that he's still learning to adapt to. There are things that he knows he could do to help himself and make things a little bit easier, but he's so upset about the event itself and this new change in his life and having to adapt to it. He's very much also struggling with his mental health, like I said, because of this, so he kind of resists getting that help. And we have Willa, whose mom is very, very sick. She, I believe, has cancer. So Willa is, visiting her mom and spending this time with her while she can, and is trying to accept that her life is going to change, but is kind of refusing to do so. And the two of them just start to learn more about each other. They learn about these things that they're dealing with, and they start to help each other through these things as feelings start to grow. This is a very character-driven novel. There really isn't much of a plot. It's really about the characters, their growth, their journeys, whether that's their personal journeys and the things that they're dealing with on their own, but also how they help each other and come together through those things, and their relationship evolving from kind of an enemies to lovers sort of situation. And I really did enjoy this. I'm so glad that I did finally pick it up because I've wanted to read it for a while, even though, like I said, I don't need to be starting any more series, but I'm happy I did start it because I really enjoyed it, and it makes me really excited to continue on and read the other books by this author. But I really enjoyed these characters. I loved following them on these journeys that they were going through individually, but also how they would help each other, and seeing them with Ryder being hard of hearing and those challenges that he now has to face and deal with. There are a lot of people in his life that have had to adjust as well, and seeing Willa just accept that about him and just do things that were more accommodating and helpful for him without him having to ask. It was just really nice to see that, but then also once Ryder kind of learns of what is going on in Willa's life, what he is willing to do for her, and just their relationship and how it grew, I really, really loved. I loved the banter between them because they do start out not liking each other, so it is this fun kind of enemies to lovers sort of dynamic, and the banter throughout the whole thing is just so good. I really enjoyed watching them go through these personal journeys as well. It was very emotional at times because these characters are not dealing with easy things, and there definitely were some moments where I was crying because it was very emotional. I definitely would recommend looking into the content and trigger warnings for this book just in case, but I just really enjoyed it overall. Every aspect of it I really liked. I liked the romance, I liked the characters, I liked that it had a little bit more hard-hitting emotional things involved while also having the fun romance. I think that was just balanced really well. And obviously I can't speak on the representation of Ryder and him being hard of hearing, but I do know that the author has actually rewritten this book because I think the first time it was published there were some criticisms from that community, and she, instead of fighting against it, listened, took those criticisms and critiques, and actually released a new edition of the book with changes made to be more accommodating and better representation for that community. So I think that that's really great. I think it's really great when an author actually listens to those critiques, especially when they are representing a certain community. So that makes me really excited to see what this author is going to do in the future, and knowing that they're willing to listen to readers and reviewers. That just, I don't know. It's like the bare minimum, but it is nice to see because you know that there are authors out there that would very much not listen and not be willing to change anything or realize that maybe they did something wrong. So it is nice to see an author actually be willing to learn and to fix those mistakes, and also just to see that representation in a romance, in a love story. It's just really nice as well. I just really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. It didn't quite feel like a 5-star, but I feel like if I continue on reading the series, which I do plan to, I feel like there's got to be a 5-star in there somewhere. I really enjoy the author's writing, the way she writes characters and relationships, whether that's the romantic ones or just the like friendships and familial relationships as well. There's definitely an importance of family within this particular novel, which I loved as well. And yeah, overall, just really enjoyed it. So I think there's a 5-star in this series going forward, and this one was very close, but I gave it 4.5 stars and just really enjoyed it. The next book that I picked up was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, which is a bit of a tongue twister title, so I'm surprised I got through it on the first try. But this is by Jessie Q. Sutanto, who wrote Dial for Aunties, which I read a couple years ago when it came out and loved, and unfortunately didn't love the sequel as much, but I was really excited to pick up a new release from her. This is kind of a similar kind of style of book. It's like a cozy mystery with a bit of like funny comedy as well. We have Vera Wong, who is, I believe, this like 60-year-old woman. She runs this tea shop, and one morning she comes down from her apartment above her tea shop, goes into the store and sees a dead body there. And, you know, she takes it upon herself because the policemen, they're not going to do a good job. They're not investigating correctly. She's going to take it upon herself to figure out what really happened because she could do a better job than them. So Vera Wong, you know, starts to collect her suspect list, starts to learn about all of the people that knew this person who was murdered, what motives they might have had, if they could have been involved. This book was so, like, it sounds weird to say this about like a murder mystery, but it was so endearing because you see Vera as she begins to introduce herself to all of these people, introduce herself to what starts out as these suspicious suspects in this murder, people that she does not trust. And as she starts to bring them all together, they all start to get to know one another. She starts to get to know them. And there's almost this like found family dynamic that begins to grow from it, which I love. I love books like this where it starts out of characters being like suspicious of one another or just like not trusting each other for some reason. But then you see this relationship and like found family aspect start to grow. That was probably like my favorite part of this book. I feel like Anxious People by Frederick Bachman kind of has a similar thing, which was one of my favorite aspects of that book as well. So I really enjoyed it. I really liked the characters. I got to a point where I was like, she's trying to solve a murder, like she's trying to figure out who of these people did it, and I don't want any of them to be responsible. And Vera Wong even had the same thing. She didn't want any of them to be responsible because she started to care for them, and as a reader I also started to care for them. So I really liked that. It was really fun. Obviously it had Jessie Q. Sutanto's humor in it, which I find very funny. Vera Wong as a character is a hoot. She is quite the character to follow. She is so quirky, so funny, and just such a fun character to be in the perspective of. You do get other characters' perspectives as well, but I just really loved her character. I think there's going to be a second book as well, which I'm hoping goes better than the sequel to Dial for Aunties. I hope I like the sequel to Vera Wong's better, but I'm really excited to be back with this character because she's just so fun. And yeah, I don't know, I really loved like the found family aspect that came out of it. It's not something that you would necessarily expect from a book that has a murder mystery as like the center plot, but that honestly becomes like not really the focus. It becomes more about these characters and what they're all going through on their own, and how Vera Wong kind of encourages them to chase their dreams or do the things that make them happy. And I really liked it. I really liked all the characters and how they all came together. I gave it 4 stars. Maybe it should have been a higher rating because I did really enjoy it. I also didn't predict like the whole mystery, which was, you know, a part of the book that I ended up not really caring about in the end because I cared about the characters by that point. But you got to the end and the reveal of all of the things that happened and the murder itself, and I didn't really predict anything, so that was kind of fun too, because I feel like I a lot of times do predict mystery and thriller endings, and that's why I don't really read them, because it makes me upset that I can predict them. So yeah, didn't predict the ending, loved the characters, thought Vera Wong was such a fun protagonist, and just had a really good time. So I gave it 4 stars, but like I said, maybe I should raise it because I am talking so highly of it. There wasn't really anything I disliked about it. So yeah, that was a very fun read, and like I said, I'm very excited to continue on with the sequel whenever that comes out. But then after that, I picked up The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is Ashley Poston's second adult romance novel. She wrote The Dead Romantics, which I read last year and loved. So I was very excited to read this because I had a feeling this was going to pull on the same heartstrings and I was going to love it just as much. You are following a character named Clementine, who recently her aunt has passed away, and so she has moved into her late aunt's apartment. And there's something weird about this apartment. It can kind of enter this weird like time slip dimension thing. There's a weird time travel aspect to it. So one night she comes home from work and there ends up being this man in her late aunt's apartment that's now her apartment, and she's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And it turns out that this man in her aunt's apartment is actually from 7 years in the past. So she is in the present day, 7 years in his future. It's a little confusing, but I swear when you read it, it makes sense. That's the thing that I love about Ashley Poston's 2 adult romances, because they both have a bit of like a magical, paranormal kind of aspect to it, but it's not anything too complicated or too confusing. It's just the right amount of magic, and you get just the right amount of explanation for it to just feel believable and to just be like swept up into the story. And obviously things become quite difficult when the 2 of them start to fall for one another, but there is this like 7-year time frame jump thing in between them, and they are quite literally living in 2 different timelines. I don't know, I just think it's such a unique concept and so fun. I really love the characters. I really enjoyed this as well. I gave this 4.5 stars, which was the same rating that I gave The Dead Romantics, and I feel like I did like The Dead Romantics more, but I think both of these books I could reread and just love even more upon a reread. I do really love the way that she writes her characters, and also just like the balance of the banter and the funny moments and the cute moments in the romance and those relationships, but also the more like hard-hitting emotional topics as well, because you do see Clementine really struggling with grief. Her aunt was someone that was very important to her. She had a very close relationship with her, and so losing her is very difficult for her. She's very much struggling with that, and so I thought it was very emotional reading about that loss and that grief that Clementine was experiencing. I don't know, something about Ashley Poston continuing to write about grief and loss, it just hits and makes me sob. This book didn't make me cry as much as The Dead Romantics. I like ugly sobbed reading The Dead Romantics, but I did cry reading this, and we got close to ugly crying, but not quite. Not as many tears, but still a lot of tears. I don't know what it is about her books and just the way she writes grief and loss, but also the way she writes the romance and the relationships also makes me very emotional. I don't know, she just has a way of pulling on my heartstrings and just making me feel all of the feelings reading these books. I also, like I said, the whole timeline, weird 7-year thing, that's hard to explain. That whole aspect of it I thought was really, really fun. It added a very like angsty, dramatic twist on the relationship. And I don't know how much else to say because I feel like that's really all the description gives, but there is a lot more that adds to the angst of their relationship, and I think it's a really fun dynamic to read about. It's very interesting, it's very unique, and not something that I've really read from before, so it makes me excited to see what Ashley Poston does next if she continues to write adult romances. I really hope so, because I've been loving the 2 that she has written so far. Yeah, I don't know, I think she just does such a good job. Obviously, you know, with a romance, you want it maybe to be a little bit more lighthearted. Obviously, the discussion of grief and loss can be a little bit emotional and hard to read, but I think she does a good job of balancing that with the more lighthearted romantic moments. The banter's incredible. There's even like, you know, sometimes there's some very cheesy moments, but to be honest, I think you need it when you have such emotional things happening at the same time. I just think she has such a good mix of all of those things. I also really liked a lot of the side characters. I loved the love interest and the complications that came along with their relationships. Basically, I just loved everything. I gave it 4.5 stars. I don't remember why I didn't give it a higher rating. I'm trying to remember why I didn't feel like it was a 5-star. I might have just not given me those 5-star feelings. Plus, I do feel like I did like The Dead Romantics a little bit more, so I feel like if either of them should be 5 stars, it should be The Dead Romantics, but yeah, I don't know. I've been gushing about this for too long, so we need to move on, but I did love it. 4.5 stars. So the final book that I read in September was The Socialites Guide to Murder by S.K. Golden, which I did read this for my 1989 reading vlog. I found books that had been compared to 1989 and read them to see if I agreed to celebrate the release of 1989 Taylor's version. We all know I love Taylor Swift, blah, blah, blah. She said it a million times. But obviously, if you want to know more of my thoughts, it's all in that vlog. That vlog is like an hour long, so all of my thoughts on this book will be there. But to summarize, this book you're following a character named Evelyn, whose father runs the Pinnacle Hotel, which is where she lives. And one night at the hotel, there is this event for this artist. He's revealing this new painting that he's been working on, and when he goes to reveal it, the painting is missing. So Evelyn kind of takes it upon herself to play detective and figure out what happened, but as she's trying to figure out what happened to this painting, who might have stolen it, what may have happened, she ends up stumbling upon the artist's body. He ends up dead, and now this is a murder investigation. So Evelyn teams up with Mac, who is the bellboy, just slash like worker at the hotel that she has a crush on, to figure out what may have happened and to solve this like murder that happened in the hotel. It's really fun. It was a fun read. It's like a cozy mystery. There's a bit of romance. There's fun characters, and so I really enjoyed it. It was a fun time, not something super memorable. As I read this, you know, over a month ago at this point, I haven't really thought about it since, but it was fun in the moment. I also said this in my 1989 vlog, that this book reminded me a lot of Legally Blonde, just if it was set in the 50s and in a hotel. Evelyn definitely had some Elle Woods vibes to her. Definitely not the same because Elle Woods is an icon and can never be replicated. But I definitely think Evelyn has a lot of similar like personality traits and characteristics that reminded me a lot of Elle Woods, and I don't know, just the bit of romance and as well as like some of the silliness and funniness that happened in this book while also trying to solve this murder definitely just gave me a lot of Legally Blonde vibes, which was really fun to read. I feel like I did get to a certain point in this book where I kind of had it all figured out. I feel like it was like before the halfway point, I had a feeling on where exactly this book was going. The reveals weren't super surprising, which like I was saying earlier, I feel like being able to predict where a mystery and or thriller is going can influence my enjoyment. So I think if I had been more surprised by the ending, I would have liked this a little bit more, but it was still enjoyable, a fun, cozy read. And I don't know, I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on it, but obviously more of my thoughts are in that 1989 vlog if you want to check that out. All right, so now we are getting into the books that I picked up in October. So the first book I finished in October was Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. I had this on my 5-star predictions for this year, and unfortunately, I was wrong. I think at this point I need to stop doing 5-star predictions because I'm never right. The 7-Year Slip was also a 5-star prediction, which I gave 4.5 stars. It was close, but not quite 5 stars. I'm just not good at predicting my 5-star reads. But this is Elizabeth Acevedo's newest release, and it's also her debut into the adult age category. So you're following a bunch of women in this family, kind of in different generations. A few of the women in this family have certain gifts, certain abilities, and Fleur, one of the women in this family, has the ability to be able to sense when someone is going to die. So this book starts out with Fleur telling her family that she is planning this living wake, and obviously that causes a lot of concern within her family. Is this living wake for her? Is it for somebody else? Did she see something? Kind of what's going on? They don't know. Fleur isn't really telling them anything, just that this living wake is happening. So this book is kind of leading up to that wake and to that moment, but it also is mostly following these women, a part of this family, and you're seeing all of their different perspectives and what they are going through in the current day, but there's also a lot of flashbacks to when they were younger, growing up, and you're seeing certain events that shaped them into who they were, and there's just a big focus on like life and death and relationships and love and womanhood and sisterhood. Those are very like common themes and things that we're really focusing on in this book, which led me to believe that I would love this because I don't know, I feel like the exploration of those things and the discussion of those things I would enjoy. However, I didn't love this. So like I said, this was a 5-star prediction for me. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I found this a little underwhelming, unfortunately. I feel like because there were so many characters that we were following and we're getting all their perspectives and we're also following them in various timelines, so you're jumping all over the place in this book. You're following a bunch of different characters in a bunch of different timelines, and I spent a majority of this book just trying to keep everything straight. I could not remember who was who and what happened to who and when it happened. It was just too much to keep track of. And I feel like I finally had an understanding of it, and then the book was over. So I was saying when I first finished this vlog that I wondered if it would benefit from a reread where I could go into it having a better understanding of who was who and what happened to who, and maybe be able to just like focus on the story and the messages, and I would maybe enjoy it more then. But I don't know, that just definitely impacted my reading experience because I just spent so much of it trying to keep everything straight. And yeah, I don't know, this book just, it tackles so many different discussions and topics. Like I was saying before, obviously life and death and grief and loss and love, those are the biggest things, but also just like the relationships between all of these women in this family and sisterhood and womanhood and the different experiences that they all have. Like, it should be something really impactful and moving and something I would enjoy, but I didn't enjoy it, and I don't feel like it was as impactful as it should have been. It was lacking the impact for me. I felt like I just could never get fully sucked into the story. I think because, again, could not keep all of the characters straight in my head and everything was a bit confusing and I couldn't remember who was who. I think that definitely played a role in it, but for some reason, just even the like more emotional moments, I just felt disconnected from it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really upset that I didn't love this. I wanted to love it. I feel like this has the making of a book that I could love. It has all these themes and topics and things that I love. It's a very character-driven novel, which again is my preference. It's just, I don't know, like on paper sounds like something I should enjoy, but unfortunately it didn't have the impact on me that I think it was intended to, so I didn't end up loving it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I'm very upset about it because I love Elizabeth Acevedo. The writing was incredible, I will say. That's why I gave it that extra like half-star rating other than just like a solid 3, because the writing is incredible. Elizabeth Acevedo is an incredible writer. Her writing is beautiful, so I loved that, but unfortunately not a winner for me, and I'm so upset about it. I'm laughing to hide the pain. I'm very upset about not loving an Elizabeth Acevedo book, but I am excited to see what she does in the future, if she goes back to young adult, or I don't know, I'm just excited to see what she does next. I will be picking up her future books, but unfortunately this was not a winner for me. Okay, sorry for any weird lighting changes. I forgot that this time of year is just like gray and cloudy and not very bright outside, so we're adjusting. I gotta get readjusted to that. But anyway, the next book that I ended up picking up in October was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir detailing the author's experience of an abusive same-sex relationship, and something that the author talks about in this book is the fact that abusive same-sex relationships are not often something that is discussed, and so sharing her experience was a way to kind of shed light on that and to bring up more conversations about it and tell people like it does happen. And I thought it was really impactful, very emotional to read. I listened to the audiobook and the author narrated the audiobook, which definitely added to the impact, and there were definitely some moments in this book that were hard to listen to and things that have really stuck with me since listening to it. Something that I thought was really impactful and something that has really stuck with me with this book and like thinking about it is that the author would like a few times throughout the book repeat the same kind of sentences and like had the similar structure of certain sentences that she repeated throughout the book a few times, but the kind of context and certain words would change throughout the novel when she would repeat that, and that would kind of show the evolution of this relationship and how it slowly changed. And I don't know how to explain it, especially because I don't remember the exact quotes, but I know like the first time it happened, it was a bunch of different sentences, a bunch of different things, but one of them was like, you sent me like this inappropriate funny text that made me smile. And then the next time that that showed up, it was like, you sent me a text and it filled me with dread. And it just like kind of slowly evolved and showed the slow evolution of this relationship and how it changed. And I thought that that was really impactful. That is like the thing that has stuck with me the most with this book is those repeated sentences and that structure that just like slowly changed and evolved throughout the book when it was repeated. Okay, and now we have a different camera that we're filming on because my camera battery died, and it will just be a long time before I'm able to pick back up filming. Anyway, no one cares. We're filming on my phone now. It literally does not matter. Anyway, what I was saying, that is something that I enjoyed with the writing, is that kind of repetitive kind of way of showing the slow evolution of this relationship and how it changed and how she noticed these changes and how she was feeling about them. But also something that with the writing that I don't think I necessarily loved was just the fact that it was very flowery and very descriptive. And I think to an extent, I can always appreciate that type of writing because I love a good quote. I definitely love some beautiful writing, some descriptive writing. It definitely can be very impactful for me. However, I do feel like it loses a bit of that impact when I'm not really sure what the author's trying to say because of all of the descriptors and because of that type of flowery writing. When the meaning of what the author's trying to say gets a little bit lost for me, that's where I struggle, because I did find with the audiobook, I was going back and re-listening to things because I wasn't sure what was being said, what was happening, what was being described because of the actual writing style. So that didn't necessarily work for me, but that is a more like nitpicky thing about it, because obviously this is a very impactful and emotional read, an important read as well. So I didn't end up rating this because I just feel, I don't know, I go back and forth on how to rate memoirs, if I should rate them. I've given some that I've read 5 stars because, you know, it's a 5-star rating. That's the best rating you can give. But I don't know, I just feel a bit weird rating memoirs, especially things that are so personal to these people. Obviously it's memoir, that's the whole point. That's why we need to film on the phone so that I can wrap this up, because the brain is tired. So yeah, I didn't end up giving this a rating, but definitely something I'd recommend, and very happy that I picked it up because this is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, for probably since it came out a few years ago. So very happy that I finally read this, and also I did want to read more nonfiction this year. So even though this is only the second one I've read, it's something. The next book is another one that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about because it's again in that 1989 reading vlog, but I finally read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, a very hyped up, popular book and series right now. And this book, you're following Evangeline Fox, who ends up making this deal with Jax, who is the Prince of Hearts. I'm already forgetting details. But Jax is one of the fates, one of the godly fates, who is able to have these certain abilities and grant these certain wishes. And Evangeline has always been told, you know, you don't make deals with these fates because they're not good people. A lot of times it will not work out in your favor, but she is desperate because the man that she is in love with is engaged to her stepsister and she wants to put a stop to the wedding. So she makes a deal with Jax to make him stop the wedding, make it not happen, in exchange for her to give 3 kisses of Jack's choosing. So he will choose 3 people for her to kiss, and she's very suspicious of it. Obviously, he has his own personal reasons for this and things to gain from it, but she is very desperate, so she goes along with it. And honestly, that's kind of it for what the description of this book gives you. It only really also says that Evangeline and Jax and this bargain that they've made is more than what Evangeline thought it would be, and you're really just seeing them kind of forced to interact with each other in this relationship that they have because of this bargain. And I thought this was fine. I don't know, something about me and Stephanie Garber's books, we are just not friends. We do not get along. I'm sure Stephanie Garber as a person is wonderful. I have no beef with her. However, I do have beef with her books. I don't even have beef. I don't feel the same way that a lot of other people do about them. I just don't love them the same way. I thought this book was fine. It didn't do anything that I thought was super unique or super special. I liked Jax as a character. I think he is the most interesting character of this entire book. And I don't know, I don't want to say the whole series because obviously this is the only one I've read, but so far the characters we've been introduced to, he's really the only one that I find interesting. I definitely think there is an intriguing and promising premise to this series, but I do feel like this book was a lot of setup for that, so it didn't really feel like a whole lot happened. And I don't know, just something about the way Stephanie Garber kind of paces her books, the way she plots them, the directions in which things go and the plot goes, I don't mesh with it. I don't understand it. It feels a bit chaotic. It feels a bit like, why are we doing this now? Okay, I guess we're doing this, but why? It just feels a bit random to me. I don't know. I don't get her books. They're just not for me. Obviously, I love that so many people love this series. I think the 3rd and final book in this series just came out, and there's a lot of people who are really excited about it, and that's very exciting. I am kind of tempted to continue on with the series just because this book was so much setup and it does have an interesting premise, and I am kind of interested to see where it goes. And also I know that the 2nd book, a lot of people like lose their minds. They go cuckoo bananas over the ending because something clearly happens, and I'm kind of curious. So yeah, there is a part of me that would maybe continue on with this series, especially because this first book was so much setup for what's going to be happening. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was super unique as far as YA fantasies go. I didn't necessarily love the characters. I don't dislike Evangeline. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts about her, to be honest. Jax is really the only character that I think is kind of interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts, but I'm so happy for everyone who does love this series. I'm excited to see other people be excited about the final book. I don't know. Even when I'm not not like participating in series, like if I'm not reading them along with everybody, but just like knowing that so many people are so excited, it just, I don't know, something about it makes me happy seeing other people excited for books. But we'll see if I'm with them. We'll see if I continue on with the series, but I thought this one was fine. Next up, I did pick up The Long Game by Elena Armas. This is a 2023 release, Elena Armas's newest book, and you are following Adeline, who ends up getting into a bit of a scandal with the soccer team that she works for. Her dad is the owner of the team. She kind of gets herself into a bit of hot water with a bit of a scandal that ends up going viral. And so her dad's like, yo, you bring in a lot of bad press to this team. You need to go. So he sends her to the middle of nowhere, I believe in North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina. And she is sent there to help with this struggling soccer team. But what she doesn't know until she gets there is that it's actually a little league team and it's full of 9-year-olds. And also when she gets there, she runs into Cameron Caldani, who is this professional soccer player who recently retired, but a lot of the details of his retirement are kind of a mystery, and no one really knows that he's hiding out in this small town, but she knows who he is because she's obviously involved in the soccer world, and the two of them don't really get off on the best foot. They don't have the best first interactions with one another, but they both realize that they can kind of help each other with this soccer team. They both care about it and they both want it to work out. So they reluctantly start working together to help this soccer team full of 9-year-old girls be successful, and you see their relationship kind of evolve, obviously, into something more. And I had a good time with this. I actually, while reading this, it was kind of one of those books that I forgot I was reading. I would get really sucked into it a lot of the times and just kind of get lost in the story and the characters and forget I was reading, which is obviously what you want. That doesn't happen with every book that I read. I don't always get sucked in, but I feel like I know it's a book that I'm really enjoying if that does happen. Unfortunately, though, this was not a 5-star for me. I gave this 4 stars. I still really enjoyed it, and I feel like potentially I could like it more on a reread. I always say that, and then do I ever reread these books? No, I just reread the Lunar Chronicles over and over and over again. But I had a couple of like more nitpicky problems, and then there was one problem that I had that really is what I think knocked this down from that 5-star or like potential 5-star rating. So one of my more like nitpicky things is that the way that the kids like talked in this book, sometimes they like talked as if they were way older than 9 years old. I think some authors can write kids in ways that they act a bit older than they are, sometimes too young for their age. And I feel like this was an instance of them acting a little bit older and talking and using language that was a little too old for 9-year-olds. And I'm not saying that kids aren't intelligent, and you know, obviously every kid is different. Kids are great and they are smart, and that adults can take lessons and learn things from kids. Of course, I think that kids are great and should be listened to and should be respected more. But my issue is more just so that like there were points where a 9-year-old was like spewing this wisdom and this knowledge to our main characters, and it's like, you are not 9 years old. You cannot convince me that this is a 9-year-old child. Like it was a little unrealistic for me. I also think there were some times within the dialogue and the writing that were a bit like, obviously there's cheesiness because that is what Elena Armas does. I accept that there's going to be a bit of like cringy cheesiness with her books, but that's kind of why I love it. I love a good cheesy moment, but there were also some moments within the dialogue and the writing that were just a little confusing. There would be times where it would take me out of it because I'm trying to understand what these characters are talking about. Sometimes it was just like worded weird, but those are the things that I could have looked past and given this a higher rating, like a 4.5, maybe a 5-star even, I don't know. But one thing that really kept taking me out of the story, like I said, I kept getting lost in it. So I was like sucked into the story and really enjoying it for the most part. And then Cameron would say, darling, and I'd be out. I got taken out of it. And listen, it's not that I had a problem with him calling her darling. It's the fact that he called her darling every single page. It was excessive. I would actually love to know how many times the word darling was used in this book. If you have this on your Kindle or just like any sort of e-reader or on an ebook or something, and you can search for words in it to see how many times it shows up, I would love to know how many times the word darling shows up in this book, because I bet I could flip to any page and I would see that word. Okay, well, of course, now I'm going to be proven wrong, but he's speaking, so therefore he should be calling her darling. It's that excessive. It got to a point where even the moments where him calling her darling were cute, it lost a bit of impact because he had called her darling so many times in the previous pages that it just didn't hit the same. It's not that I had a problem with her using that pet name. It just was excessive, and it would just take me, it got to a point where it would take me out because I just started to notice how often it was used. And once I noticed, it became like a joke for me. Like every time he'd say it, I'd kind of laugh and it would take me out of the story. So I just wish that that wasn't used as excessively as it was, but it was cute. in certain moments. But there were a lot of other moments where it just felt unnecessary and really excessive and took away from the impact of when it was cute when he would use that pet name. I also kind of feel like Cameron lost a bit of his personality once they got together, but this is a bit of a slow burn, so it takes a while for them to get together, which is what I appreciated about this book. I liked the characters, I liked their relationship, I loved the kind of like, I wouldn't say enemies, I would just say like dislike to lovers storyline. I liked the small town vibes. I liked a lot of the side characters. I liked a lot of aspects of this book, but I will say I do feel like something about Cameron like shifted once they actually got into the relationship. I was like, where did his personality go? He just says darling over and over again, and then that was it. Also, I just looked at the cover and it reminded me there's a goat in this book. And I loved the goat. That was just such like an added bonus. So yeah, a lot of like mixed feelings, but overall, like I did really enjoy this. I had a good time with it. And I liked, again, the small town setting. I liked that they lived in these like cabins in the woods. Cameron lived in the cabin and Adeline was staying in basically like the little shack, a little shed that was next to the cabin. And I feel like that added a lot of fun dynamics as well, because they were literally like next door neighbors essentially, and also caused a lot of like tension and angst with their relationship. So that was fun. There were also cats. So I love cats. Yeah, I don't know. There were a lot of things I did like about this. The excessive use of the word darling really, really took me out of it, but I did enjoy it. I feel like it could have been a 5-star if I didn't notice how many times he said it. And I'm so sorry now that I've pointed it out, because if you pick this up, now you're gonna notice, and I may have potentially ruined this for you. So I'm sorry, but you probably also would have noticed on your own because it's a lot. So after that, I ended up reading The Glass Witch by Lindsay Puckett. This is a fun, like Halloween-y kind of middle grade novel. We have our main character, Addie, and she is a part of this family of witches. And there is this curse that is sort of upon this family if a certain thing happens, and Addie kind of sort of accidentally, kind of intentionally enacts this curse and causes it to start. So her bones turn into glass, and now also this witch hunter is after her and her family. So with the help of her family and her new best friend, Addie kind of goes on this journey to collect all the things she needs to put a stop to this curse and to this witch hunter who will take away the magic from the town and from her family. And so she wants to put a stop to that. So this was really fun. It was really cute. It is compared to Hocus Pocus, which I definitely got those kind of vibes. Definitely with the kids in Hocus Pocus trying to put a stop to the witches. Addie and her friends and family are trying to put a stop to this witch hunter. It kind of was a very similar dynamic. And this book also kind of gave me Halloween Town vibes, because there is a point in this book where Addie is going around trying to collect all these ingredients and all these things she needs to put a stop to the witch hunter and to this evil person. And that definitely reminds me of the first Halloween Town movie. And if you know me, Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town are my favorite Halloween movies because they are fun, they are nostalgic, and they are not scary, which is all I want in Halloween things. So it was really fun to read a story that kind of reminded me of those things, and I think this is the type of book that I really would have enjoyed when I was younger. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I thought it was fun. I really don't have a lot of thoughts about it. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was cute. I also liked the chapters that we got from the witch hunter's perspective. Definitely a little scary, and I feel like maybe if I was younger, I would have been a little scared by those chapters, but me as an adult enjoyed them, and I think they added a very interesting dynamic and perspective to the book. It was a fun thing to pick up in October leading up to Halloween. It was kind of the perfect thing to read, but it wasn't something that I was absolutely obsessed with. I don't think I'm going to remember it very much down the line, but I had a good time with it. And I think if you know someone who is in that middle grade age demographic and they're looking for something to pick up in the Halloween season, I definitely would recommend this. Or if you're like me and you just love Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town and want to read something very similar, I would definitely recommend this. Okay, the end is in sight. We have 2 more books to talk about, and the next one I'm going to talk about is The Fiancée Farce by Alexandria Bellefleur. I read this again in that 1989 vlog, so all of my thoughts are there, but you are following these 2 characters, Tansy and Gemma, who strike up this deal to be engaged. It's a fake engagement though. Tansy has lied to her family that she is dating this person named Gemma, who is a model on these romance books, but she, doesn't think that she's going to run into Gemma, so it's not going to be a problem. She can kind of keep up this ruse for as long as she wants and eventually tell them they broke up, but it's just enough to get her family off her back. But then she ends up running into Gemma, and her family's like, isn't that your girlfriend? So Gemma, instead of kind of calling out Tansy on that lie, she goes along with it and actually announces their engagement. So the 2 of them fake this engagement so that Gemma can inherit her family's company and that Tansy can save the bookstore that she owns and that has been in her family for generations and that she loves. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really, really fun. I loved Tansy and Gemma individually, but also together. And the dynamic between the two of them was really fun to read. The banter and the humor I really, really enjoyed. And I also really liked a lot of the side characters and also just like fake dating, fake relationships in any capacity. I love if done well, and I feel like the setup for this book, while a little ridiculous, I think was fun and believable to an extent, and I think it made sense for their fake relationship. Sometimes you read a fake dating book and it's like, why are you faking it? Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. The reasoning for why it's happening is a little like underwhelming or just maybe isn't the best foundation. However, I feel like this one made a lot of sense, and it was also just like a very fun and silly premise, but I just really enjoyed it. Like I said though, if you want to know all of my thoughts on this, it's in that 1989 vlog, but overall I gave this 4.5 stars. One of my favorite books that I read in October. Honestly, I had a lot of average reads in the month of October, if that hasn't been obvious from a lot of my 3.5 star ratings, so it was nice to read something that I really enjoyed. 4.5 stars, and definitely one of my favorite romances that I read this year. Okay, we've made it to the final book that I read in October, and this was also probably a standout from the month as well, and that's Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is actually a reread for me, and I'm so happy I reread it because I wanted to reread this book before going into the sequel because I had forgotten so much of it, but I actually enjoyed this upon a reread more than I did the first time I read it. So in this book, you're following Bree, who has been accepted into this program for like high schoolers to go to this college and to take courses there. It's a residential program for bright high schoolers at UNC Chapel Hill. And she ends up getting there and witnesses someone kill a demon, and she's like, that's not normal. And that is sort of Bree's introduction to the Legendborn Society, who most of these people in this society are like descendants of King Arthur and his knights. Bree kind of makes the connection that the Legendborn and this society and people involved in it may have had something to do with her mother's death. So she kind of integrates herself into the Legendborn Society to try and find answers. And of course, she meets some really interesting people there. She meets Nick and she meets Sel and a lot of other great characters. And it's also a very emotional read because obviously we have Bree who's dealing with the grief and loss of her mother. And that is something that is very prevalent throughout the book and I thought handled really well. I thought the discussion of grief and loss was really, really well done, and the depiction of it was well done within Bree. She obviously is very much struggling with that, and I think seeing how she handles that and how the ways that she copes, like there's a lot of different ways in which she copes and deals with it, and I thought that that was really well done and very emotional to read. And I also just really loved Bree as a character. I also really love Nick, and I also love Sel, and I love a lot of the side characters as well. There are a lot of characters in this book. That's why this time around I gave it a 4.5 star rating, which originally I gave it 4 stars. So it did get higher on this reread, which was exciting. But that is one of those things that keeps me from giving it a 5 star. There's a lot of characters and a lot of like terms and just a lot of details about the Legendborn Society that I still don't fully understand. I feel like I had a better understanding of it upon this reread, but there's just a lot of information, a lot of characters, a lot of details, and I'm not gonna lie, I still find it a bit confusing and a little overwhelming, but I still really enjoyed it. I think the magic system within this book is very fascinating. Also, there's like multiple magic systems. There's multiple groups of people and types of people that use magic in different ways, and I find that very interesting to learn about. And something that is keeping me very interested to see where this series is going to go is that the Legendborn Society is kind of preparing for this war that is sort of on the horizon. It's going to be happening soon, and so Bree getting involved to find answers about her mom's death, this is kind of the worst time for her to get involved in it because there's so much happening within the Legendborn Society. There's a lot of tension, and there is this war that is approaching. So she's kind of getting herself involved in that, whether she wants to or not. Yeah, it just has a very interesting premise, very interesting plot, very interesting magic system, great characters. I love Bree, Nick, and Sel so much. I think the dynamic between all of them is really fun to read. So really interested to see how that develops as well, because there's a bit of romance, a bit of tension with that in this book as well, which obviously is not really the main focus, but it is a fun addition to it, and I'm interested to see where that all goes. But yeah, I really loved this. I actually feel like even though it is a reread, I feel like I might just have to put it in my favorite books of this year list. We'll see. I have no idea how I'm going to make that list this year, not because there's so many options, options, but because there's really not a whole lot of books to talk about in my favorite books of the year list, I've had like 6 5-star reads this year. It's not looking good for me. But I do feel like even though it is a reread, I might have to mention it in that video just because of how much I loved it this time around. I definitely liked it a lot more upon a reread, and it makes me so excited to continue on with the series. I believe this is going to be a trilogy, so who knows when the 3rd book's going to come out, but I'm excited to pick up the sequel soon. But that is it. Those are all of the books that I read in September and October. I'm so sorry once again for the lighting and the camera changing. I feel like wrap-ups, I just need to film on my phone from the start. It'll probably be a lot easier. And also, like I said, this time of year it gets dark so early and it's just not super sunny and bright to begin with. So there's just a lot of adjusting that I'm gonna have to do because I always forget this happens every year. But anyway, would love to chat about any of these books I talked about in this wrap-up down below. If you've read any of them, your thoughts, I'd love to have a conversation about them. Definitely had a lot of average reads, I feel like, this fall, so hopefully the last couple months of the year are a bit of an improvement, especially because, like I said, only had 6, I think, 5-star reads this year. That's it, other than rereads. I think 6 new 5-star reads, which is not great. I feel like it's normally a struggle for me to decide what 5-star reads I'm gonna put in my top 10, but now I don't even have a top 10 of 5-star reads this year. So that's a little upsetting, but that's a problem for me in like a month or 2 when I put my favorite books of the year list together. But anyway, yeah, that's gonna be it for this fall wrap up, my September and October reads. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.